Have you ever been in the grocery store just staring at a wall of products and felt totally overwhelmed? You see cage-free, natural, organic, and all these labels are supposed to make our choices easier, right? But a lot of times, they just create more confusion. So today, we're going to cut through all that noise and find out what the words on your food actually mean. Picture this. You're right there, in the meat or dairy aisle, and you're faced with just dozens of choices. And they're all covered in these really appealing claims. All natural, cage-free, free-range. I mean, they sound fantastic, but what's really the difference between them? As we're about to see, some of these labels that sound so good, well, they mean very little. So, that brings us to the big question. When you decide to pay a little extra for a product with one of these special labels, what are you really getting for your money? Is it a higher standard for quality and how the animals are treated? Or is it just really, really clever marketing? Let's dig in.
We're going to start with the labels that are pretty much all sizzle and no steak. These are the ones that are almost entirely marketing, with hardly any real rules or regulations behind them. They sound great, but when you look closer, they just don't hold up.
Okay, let's take the word natural. It's got to be one of the most misleading claims in the entire grocery store. We see it and we immediately picture animals roaming free in a pasture. But the USDA's actual definition for meat has absolutely nothing to do with how the animal was raised. It only applies after the animal is slaughtered. It just means the meat doesn't have artificial ingredients and is minimally processed. That's it. It tells you zero about hormones, antibiotics, or the animal's life. And that's the real issue, right? One report summed it up perfectly, saying the natural label is, and I quote, effectively meaningless if you're trying to support better animal welfare. So if that's your goal, this particular label gives you absolutely no guarantee. Cage-free is another one that sounds really positive. And look, it's true, the birds aren't kept in tiny cages, but the reality is often a far cry from that sunny farm we imagine. Since there's no official legal definition, cage-free can just mean thousands of birds crammed together inside a massive barn, never once seeing the light of day. It's a step up from a cage, I guess, but it's a long, long way from a pasture.
Okay, so let's move on from the labels that mean almost nothing to the ones that live in this kind of murky, gray area. These are labels that do have a USDA definition, but those definitions are so packed with loopholes that they can be just as confusing.
So for poultry, the free-range label, it all comes down to a single word, access. The rule just says the birds have to have access to the outdoors. But what does access even mean? Well, it could be just a tiny door at the far end of a crowded barn that most of the birds can't even get to. In fact, the USDA has apparently considered as little as 5 minutes of access per day to be enough to earn that label. 5 minutes. You know, Consumer Reports actually gave this label a report card, and the grades are not good. Is the general free-range label meaningful? They say no. Is it verified by anyone? Nope. Are the standards consistent from one farm to the next? No again. Basically, the producer gets to decide what it means, and there's no independent oversight to check on them.
Now, the story of the grass-fed label is a really interesting case study in how these things can change. Before 2016, there was a clear government standard, but then the agency in charge just got rid of it. So now, grass-fed is just another marketing claim. The producers themselves get to define what grass-fed means for their product, and then they just submit their paperwork for approval. It's become a bit of a Wild West.
And because the rules are so loose now, a scene just like this, a feedlot, can still be part of a so-called grass-fed animal's life. See, many are grain-finished for the last few months of their lives to fatten them up. So unless that label specifically says 100% grass-fed or grass-finished, you just can't be sure that animal actually spent its whole life out on a pasture. All right, after all that bad news, let's talk about the heavyweight champion of food labels. I'm talking about the USDA Organic Seal. This is, by far, the most regulated and comprehensive food label in the entire country. So here's the crucial difference. Unlike all the other labels we've talked about, this one is actually backed by federal law. The standards are incredibly strict. For animals, it means they get 100% organic feed, no routine antibiotics or hormones, and they have to have living conditions that let them act like animals are supposed to, including grazing on pasture. And the most important part? It's all checked through mandatory on-farm inspections every single year. And all that hard work has built a ton of consumer trust. You can see it in the market. Total organic milk sales shot up over 7% in 2024. It's clear people believe in what that seal represents, and they are definitely voting with their dollars.
But, even the best systems have their challenges. And the history of the organic program shows that as the industry gets bigger, new problems pop up, and the rules have to constantly evolve to keep up.
A perfect example of this was something called the origin of livestock loophole. So the rule was originally meant to give a conventional farm a one-time chance to switch its herd over to organic. But some of the huge operations figured out they could exploit the vague wording to constantly bring in cheaper, conventionally raised cows into their organic herds. It was totally unfair. But the good news is, after years of people pushing for change, the USDA finally closed that loophole for good.
So, after all that, how do we actually find our way through this maze and make choices we can feel good about? Well, the answer really comes down to looking for one specific thing.
In a recent press release, the USDA itself kind of pointed us toward the solution. They are now strongly encouraging producers to use third-party certification. It's almost like they're admitting that their own oversight can only go so far, and that independent verification is the real key to building trust.
So here it is. This is the clearest signal you can look for in a package: independent third-party certification. What that means is some other organization, one that has no skin in the game, has actually gone to the farm, done an audit, and verified that it meets a clear public standard.
So who are these groups? Well, here are a few of the most respected logos to keep an eye out for. If you're buying beef, that American Grass-Fed Association seal is your guarantee of a 100% grass diet. And for animal welfare in general, look for seals like Certified Humane or Animal Welfare Approved. Seeing one of those logos on a product, it adds a whole other layer of verification that you can actually trust.
At the end of the day, we're the ones with the power to change things. But that all starts with understanding what's really going on behind the label. It's not about being perfect. It's just about knowing how to find the claims that are actually credible. So now that you can read between the lines, the choice is yours.